now underway here in Providence and across the state of Rhode Island, as well as the better part of New England and, well, I guess the better part of this half of the country, as temperatures are now on the decline. If you are interested on power outage updates, on transportation services, you can head over to our website, GoLocalProv.com, for more information there. We are going to continue with not too much storm information, although we will get an update on the city of Providence from our city council president later on in the show. But we are going to continue with regular scheduled program here on Go Local Live. So I would like to introduce you to our first guest. Paul Kandarian is going to join us right now. Paul, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to our conversation today. So Paul is a community liaison person with COAAST, which stands for Creating Outreach About Addiction Support Together. So Paul's going to talk to us today a little bit about what he does with COAAST, about the statewide event that's happening on January 15th, and a little bit about his personal experience with addiction and how addiction impacts families. So Paul, let's start off a little bit about your story and a little bit about your personal experience with addiction.
Okay, well, my story is, I've been with COAAST since its inception 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm a writer and an actor, and we got together to do this play about addiction called 4 Legs to Stand On. It's about a family coming to grips with the disease of addiction, its impact on family. And my personal connection with it is my son is a little more over 3 years, knock wood, I wish that, in recovery. He was addicted to pills, and he went to heroin. He got clean, went in the Army, came out. He saw horrible things in the Army, came out and got addicted again, and then he got help at the VA. Long story short, he's 3+ years in recovery, and he's become part of the COAAST family, as it were. He's going to be a guest speaker at our event. He's done speaking engagements about addiction before. He's just a very, very well-spoken, bright kid. I'm glad to have him back. I mean, he was in the grips of addiction for several years, and it was touch and go there for a while. But he's back, and he's an example of hope, and that this disease can be overcome with the help of others and your own inner strength. So.
Talk to me about what it was like for you to see your son fight with, struggle with, and battle addiction.
Well, like I say at the end of our plays too, it's every parent's nightmare to see your children in the grips of something that they can't control, and as a parent, you're helpless. You're frightened, you're frustrated, you're uncertain, you're helpless, you don't know what to do. So it was, they were the darkest years of my life, without question, and his as well, and our family in general. It's an incredibly difficult thing to see your child doing things that you know are destructive and potentially lethal, and not be able to do anything about it. You just want to reach in there and grab whatever demons are making them do this and throttle them. But I mean, you can't. So the overriding sense of helplessness, I think, is what most parents or other caretakers or other family members or friends of someone in the grips of this disease, that's pretty much what you feel.
And I think why I've been looking forward to speaking with you today is because you do provide that unique perspective when it comes to addiction. Not only have you been personally impacted, you know, your son has dealt with this disease, he's overcome it, he's in recovery, like you're mentioning, and you chose to do something about it. You chose to support your son all the way, and then you chose to get involved with this group, with COAAST, and then you've continued to help others, to continue to spread the message. So talk to me a little bit about the family aspect, how addiction has impacted maybe your family, and how you've seen this epidemic that we're going through impact other people's families, because that's a little bit about what your message is in the play is about, and we'll get to that aspect. But talk to me a little bit about how you've experienced how addiction has impacted families.
It can tear apart even the best of families. In this disease, and it is a disease, addiction's a disease, certifiable to brain disease, it's a disease. It can affect a family like any other disease, except in a more, I don't know, divisive sort of way, because other diseases, diabetes, cancer, so they're more like quote unquote acceptable diseases, and addiction isn't, and it can put family members at odds with each other, and figuring that out, coming to grips with that, and then trying to formulate a plan of attack to help the person involved. So it can be one of the more divisive diseases that there are out there, and the impact on families, unbelievable. Because you wouldn't turn your back on somebody who had cancer or diabetes or any other disease, but in many cases you're advised to turn your back on them, just turn them out, send them out into the street, the hell with them, let them figure it out on their own. But you wouldn't do that with any other disease. So there's that. I mean, if you've got those two factors like grinding away at each other, it makes the recovery process that much more unworkable and really difficult. Because the poor person with the addiction is right in the middle of it, and they're seeing the family torn apart by this, and that makes them feel even worse. But in the grips of addiction, they don't. The addiction's stronger than anything they want to do for themselves. The addiction overrides that. So the short version is it can tear families apart. It can bring families close together, but it's one of the most divisive, destructive things that it can do to a family. That's the short version of a very long story.
Well, and if people have been fortunate enough to not be personally impacted by this, they might not understand it, but unfortunately, so many people have been impacted in some way or another, and I sadly don't see that changing anytime soon. Thankfully, we have people like yourself that are working to make a difference and trying to make the situation better. Unfortunately, Rhode Island is facing this crisis, and we can call it a crisis, we can call it an epidemic, because there is proof of that, and we've spoken to many experts on this show, in fact, about it and about the numbers. Talk to me a little bit about the organization COAAST, and it's an interesting organization in the work that you do and the type of therapy that you do. Talk to me a little bit about your involvement and about the organization.
Well, I got involved a little over 3 years ago. I met Annabeth on a movie shoot. I was playing a mafia hitman who was protecting her, of all things. It was bizarre.
That's cool.
It was a fun film.
Yeah.
I get to shoot people. I loved it. And so
cool, because it was a film.
Yes,
it
it's
wasn't real.
Yeah. I haven't killed in real life, as far as I know. But Annabeth's a good kid. I call her a kid. She was NYU drama therapy major, and she's since graduated. But she told me she had gone through the pain of addiction in her own life with people she's lost, people near and dear to her, and she was putting together this organization and this play that she was writing to address the disease of addiction. And my son at that time was in the grips of it. I said, well, if this comes to pass, let me know. Fast forward, she did let me know. A couple of years ago, my son was in recovery, and she put together this play, Four Legs to Stand On. So I auditioned, and I got the part as the father. It's a four-person play, mom, dad, the addict, son or daughter. We have two casts, and a younger daughter who tries to keep it all together. But anyway, it's called Four Legs to Stand On because it takes place around a table, a kitchen table, where a lot of family drama unfolds. And I got the part as the father. I helped write the ending, the father's monologue at the end, because he didn't really say much. He was just kind of sitting there through the whole thing. But the corollary is that in the play he has cancer and he's fighting it, and that's the acceptable disease. And then along comes the child with the disease of addiction, and it just outlines it in briefly, because this drama unfolds in real life over the course of months, years, and this happens in 35 minutes. But it addresses the uncertainty, the fear, the frustration. So that's my part in it, and we've done it, all over the state of Rhode Island. We've done it at the Albert Medical School, for Brown University doctors. We've done it at Phoenix House down in Exeter. Done it for doctors up at Children's Hospital in Boston, all over Rhode Island, all over Massachusetts, and we're doing it at a ton of places this year. So yeah, that's my part in it. That's how I came to be involved in it, and that's what we do. We try to raise awareness, lift the stigma off addiction, because you're never going to solve a problem if you don't talk about it. And we try to say there's no shame in talking about this disease, because make no mistake, it's a disease, and like any other disease, it can be fought with the help of others. I mean, there's things in place to get help if you need help. So and that's a nutshell of what we do. Big nutshell, but it's a nutshell.
Well, and you mentioned stigma, and a lot of people have talked about that as a challenge. What do you think the biggest challenge is to overcome this crisis that we're facing in the state and really in the nation?
I guess just awareness and the conversation, starting the conversation, and getting more people involved. And a lot more people are getting involved. The stigma is slowly lifting. I don't know if we'll ever be able to eradicate. We'll never be able to eradicate all diseases, I don't think. But this is one that it starts young. I mean, like anything else, you got to teach kids at an early age the things that are out there that are bad for you. And the tricky thing about the disease of addiction is some people have the disease in them and some don't. Some people can do drugs and play around with this, that, and the other and just walk away from it. Other people can't. My son has the disease and he has a predilection for doing this. So he can. I'm an ex-smoker. I quit smoking a year ago, the day after the inauguration, which was a huge challenge.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. But I have that addictive personality too. I can't smoke a couple of cigarettes and that'll be the end of it. I have to smoke a whole pack. And it's like that with any addictive disease, any other addiction. And he's like that. So, yeah, I don't know what we can do to eradicate it. We can cut it down by, again, telling young people, the bad part about drug abuse and just awareness, shedding light on darkness is the best. We'll call it a cure, but it's enlightenment. I mean, it's you let people know, like I said, from an early age on, you have to ingrain it in them that this stuff will kill you. It's not good stuff, and hope for the best. I think we've got a long way to go. We made inroads. I mean, the big farm was a huge part of this problem, and it still is, because they would overprescribe everything because there's money to be made, obviously.
Yeah.
So they would overprescribe. Kids, adults, anybody who was taking this stuff could get hooked on it. And as in my son's case, he was taking it, stealing to feed that habit. That got to be too expensive, so he got hooked on heroin, which is cheaper. It's a cheaper way to die, I guess. So the big farm has been cracked down on to a certain extent. Now you can't overprescribe as much as you used to, so it shouldn't be as available. It's still available on the street. But, I mean, there's more regulations in place, but it really is attitude, too. It comes down to, like I said, we teach our young people the examples that we set, and communication, just talking about it. Just talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, because it's okay to talk about it, because that's where the healing starts. So.
I find it so interesting from experiences that I've gone through, from experiences that I've heard people tell their stories. It started from just listening to news stories, from reading news stories, from speaking with people. It started with prescription pills, and then it turned to street drugs. And I mean, it sounds like the same story over and over again. And it doesn't matter who you talk to, no matter what income group you come from, no matter what people look like, sound like, it doesn't matter what part of the country you in, it's the same exact story.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter. And it's troubling and it's frustrating, and people are dying because of it. Let me ask you this as a parent. You are out there and you are working to help change the stigma, to provide more awareness, which is what you just spoke about, working to change it. And you said we need to support each other through this to help people overcome addiction. As a parent and as a family member, do you feel like when you were going through this with your son, do you feel like you had that support? Because things are a little bit different now than they were 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Had the support of family?
Of anybody, of community.
The most difficult thing I found was when as many parents do, I was kind of like denying that he had a problem.
Yeah.
I was kind of looking the other way because my father's heart just didn't want to know.
Yeah.
He could never do something like that, but he was. But when it came to a head, reaching out for help was so difficult.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know where to turn. I would call his doctor when he was a kid, and he said, well, you might try this social service agency and this. I called my state legislatures, I called everybody, and they were like, well, I don't, really don't know, you might, there was nothing. It's like the fog of war. It's like the first, half hour of Saving Private Ryan. You just get bombarded with information, and you have no idea where to turn. I called McLean's Hospital. There's a great psychiatric hospital in Belmont, Mass. And they said, okay, if he's got insurance, no. So, well, it's $40,000 a month. I guess he's not going there. It was absolutely brutal. So I think that's a huge part of the puzzle. It's getting better because there's a lot more resources out there. There's a lot more central locations to get information and get pointed in the right direction where there wasn't several years ago when I was just starting out in this. So that's helpful to have a central repository, if you can call the State Department of Health, or an addiction hotline, and you can get help when you need it, because a lot of the times the biggest part of addiction is trying to get them help, to get them to want to get the help,
Yeah.
because it doesn't help at all if they don't want it, because they'll just fight it tooth and nail. My son went through rehab a few times, and he could get out and he went back. And I used to say he failed rehab, but somebody corrected me. And no, rehab failed him, because the protocols that are in place for rehab now are decades old, and they definitely need to be revamped. And there's hopefully studies being made of that, but that's a whole nother story. But yeah, I think getting help right away is tough, because sometimes there's no beds available, and that's a huge problem. It's getting better, and it will get better. But in the meantime, if they really want help, it's really, really kind of sometimes difficult to get them into a facility where they can get help. And I have no idea how this relates to your original question, which I totally forgot.
No, it's fascinating and it's interesting, and I think you did touch on it.
Right.
Just briefly before we have you go, Paul, there's a Rhode Island Department of Health sponsored event, January 15th.
Yes.
You are doing the play. It's a kind of a shortened version of the
Yeah.
play, and then a talk back. Briefly tell me a little bit about it.
Oh, January 15th at the Veterans Auditorium, as you mentioned, from 6 to 9, I think. We have guest speakers, TED Talk style presentations from local speakers, interactive skits, and so forth. 3 guest speakers, Hosea Rich from Brown, Alyssa Sullivan, a yoga teacher and author, who will discuss suffering and how to create authentic connections to joy, and my son.
It's someone you know.
I
You know a guy.
I know this guy. I know a guy. It's a Rhode Island thing. I know this guy. He's my son, an Army combat veteran in active recovery, who has done public speaking before. The first time he did it for Peter Navarro. I think he was the U.S. Senator when the last administration, and he was doing town hall things across the state. My son did a speaking. He was a speaker at one of the events, and he just blew me away. It's how composed and articulate he was. And he's since done several other speaking engagements around the state in Massachusetts. So that's been great. So he's going to talk about that, because he's a veteran. And we at COAAST, there's a veteran component to it, to what we do. It's a long, Annabeth can probably tell you more about it than I can, but he's the first subject of that project we have for veterans, where they talk about their addiction, the impact of service on their recovery or in their addiction. So anyway, so he'll be there. It's going to be a great event. It's free. Come on down. It's at the Veterans Auditorium. It's a beautiful facility, and it will engage in enlightenment and education.
I think that's important too. Maybe open your mind a little bit, right?
Without
Open
question.
your mind, open your heart a little bit.
Yeah, shed light.
Get a different perspective.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
All right, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone, please hang tight as we get ready for our next guest here on GoLocal.